Hello hackers, and welcome to another video that's going to show you some basic functions and how functions work in Python. Now today we are just going to be looking at how to use a function to be able to print out some information, and then also how to use a function within a function to get some information from there as well. Now obviously some of these examples aren't going to be necessarily perfect because we could just build one function that does the whole thing, but for the purposes of illustrating how functions can work together to return information or to be able to recycle or reuse some code, we're going to be building a little greeting system here today. So first things first, we want to have a look at how we can get the time so that we can get the right greeting for the time of day into the system. So we're going to import the date and time package. And that's going to basically allow us to now call this particular package, get some information from it, just like we have with Turtle in the past, and then utilize that information, which can get us the current date and time for this computer. Now we're going to be creating a function that allows us to find out what the name is of the person that we're going to be greeting. So to do that, we start by creating the function and defining it. So we start with def, which means define, and then we type the name of the function in, put a pair of parentheses, and then a colon. Now, you'll see a little bit later that inside these parentheses, we could do things like pass through an argument, but for now, in this example, we're not going to pass through an argument right at this instance. Now, in this function, we're just going to create a variable called name, and then we're going to get some input from our user, which is what is your name? Okay, and then we're going to type in this keyword, which is return, and then return that name variable. Now, what this means is that anytime somebody calls the getName function, it's going to run this code here, which creates a variable called name, gets some input from the user by asking them the question, what is your name, and then returns that input to them at the end of the function's use, which is this point here. Now from there, we're going to create our main function, which is going to do the greeting for us. So we're going to have another function here that says define, and then we're going to call this one greeting. Okay, and then from here, we're going to create a new variable. We might call this one person name, just to avoid some confusion. And then we're going to say that person name equals get name with 2 brackets. Now what that means for us is that whenever we call the greeting function, which you'll see in a minute, it's going to come to this first line of code and create a variable call for us called person name, and then at that point it is going to then also go and run this function up here, which we created earlier, which is going to search or ask the person for their name and then return it to us. Now what this means is that because we returned name to this function here, person name in our greeting function is going to be set to the name variable that was returned to us from the getName function up there at the top. And you'll see how that works in a little while. I'm just going to create another variable called now, and I'm going to go to date time and then find the now function. Now what this allows us to do is it gets us the current time. So that is year, month, day, hour, minute, seconds, millisecond, and I think even microsecond. So it's very, very specific. And then I'm going to set a variable for hour. And the reason I want to do this is just so I can show you how the function works a little bit later. I'm going to say now.hour. Okay, and obviously we could have included that up here at the top, but I'm going to make some calculations with this a little bit later. But now.hour is going to give us the current hour of the day. So at this point, I can start to write a very quick branch where I can say if hour is less than 12, I want to print out a formatted string that says good morning, and then in the curly braces I'm going to include person name. Okay, so obviously if the current hour of the day is less than 12, so it is still the morning, even the very early morning at 1 a.m, which we might class as night, but to keep it simple we'll call it morning, it's going to say to us good morning. Now if it's not morning, okay, we want to check another part of another sort of condition for some code, and we're going to say if the hour is less than 16, I want to print a different string this time, and that formatted string is going to be good afternoon. And then again, I'm going to include the person's name. And then again, I can check here, if hour is less than 19, print formatted string, good evening, the person name. And then finally, at all other times, I'm just going to give them a good night message. Okay, the last thing that we need to do so that our code can run is we need to call our greeting function. So right down here at the very bottom of my code, I'm just going to call greeting. And then from there, I can press the play button and start to have a look at how this particular application works. So when I press play up here at the top, or I right click on my function in PyCharm and say run basic functions, this will open up a version of a shell for me, and that allows me to type my name in. So Mr. Hyde, and when I press enter, you can see that it says good morning, Mr. Hyde. Now the reason that we know that our code is working correct is because if we have a look down here at the date and time at the bottom, you can see that it is 10:21 a.m. So obviously we are still in the morning. Now I said I was going to perform a little calculation to see if that changes things. So what I want to do this time is I'm going to say that I want my hour variable to now equal the current hour plus 4. So obviously if we add 4 hours to this one, it is going to get us to 2 p.m. So obviously we're looking now at the number 14 because the current hour is 10 plus 4 is 14. So we should get this afternoon message when we try again. So if I type in Mr. Hyde again, I get good afternoon, Mr. Hyde, which means that our code is now selecting this other branch. Just for the last thing here, if I say current hour plus 10, obviously we would get to 8 p.m., which is hour number 20 in the day. Type in Mr. Hyde again, and we get good night, Mr. Hyde. So we're obviously coming all the way down into our else statement here. So that's the basic side of things for our function. So you can see that we get the name up here. Okay, and then we are using that name here in the function. Now I said earlier this thing called arguments. So what I can do instead is I could come into here and I could add an argument to the function called name. Now this allows us to pass some information through. Now you'll see that I put a hashtag here at the front of this one. So this means that this line of code has now become a comment. That comment does not get read by the computer when it's compiling the code, so it is the same as if the code has been deleted. Now at this stage you can see that that means that name has not been called, okay, or we don't have anywhere where the name has been created. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, and instead of calling greeting straight away, I create one called name, and we're going to put name equals get name. This is going to do the same thing as what we had before. So the first line of code that our program is going to run is it's going to run this one here where it creates a variable called name and then creates the it calls the getName function, which returns the name to this variable here. And then from there, it is going to run the greeting function, but this time we need to pass name through as a variable or an argument into our function. Now, when we scroll up here at the top, you can see that that is going to pass that through to that position there, which is fantastic, but we have a small issue. Now, because we're using the name argument here and we no longer have the person name variable on that first line, all of these variables that we created as part of our text are no longer going to work. So I just need to edit those so that they all say name, because now it's going to refer to the argument that's passed through at the front of the function up here at the top. I'm going to take away my plus 10 because we're going to get it back to the current hour. And when I run my code now, you can see that it still says the same thing. So the first thing it did was come down here and it's running the getName function, which up at the very top, as we know, asks us what is our name and returns the name variable. So if I come to here, type in Mr. Hyde, it will still say good morning, Mr. Hyde, because we now have our name being stored here as a variable. It is being passed through as an argument to our greeting function, and then our greeting function is using that piece of information here from the argument where it was set up. Now, the cool thing about this is you can see that the greeting function does not have anywhere that it actually asks us what the name is. We are using that piece of information from somewhere completely different in our program. Now, that is one of the pieces of power for arguments, but it also allows us to run our code multiple times. So say, for instance, we wanted to do a couple of extra things. We wanted to greet some more people. We could get some more names. Or we could come back to this later on and then run it again at a later stage. Now, our step from here is we're going to be looking at some text adventure games, and that's where we're going to start to link together some of these functions so that they can start to tell the story for our player. So I hope to see you over in the next video. Good luck, and we'll see you there.